I was farming in partnership with my dad and my brother, and back in '04 my dad retired, and then me and my brother, we split our partnership, so I went on my own then with my wife. Young family on the way up. I'm hoping I'm doing the right thing for them. We're running about 3 holdings now, 3 blocks, 1 moorland block and lowland block now. We're in the North Country mules mainly. I do breed some Dartmoor mules myself, and we run a flock of Scotch blackface ewes up on the commons at Dartmoor.
And why did you choose those particular breeds?
So I can breed my own mules, trying eventually to become a closed flock. You're not bringing in anyone else's troubles, no one else's worm burdens and whatever else, sheep scab and whatever problems there is. I'd like to know what I've got, you know. I can breed the type of sheep and the size of sheep which suits me. That's my main aim. I've just started introducing the Clin to some of the ewes to try that bloodline.
I tend to come around once a year and run through a yearly plan. We go through what was good last year, what was bad last year.
One of the things that health planning asks people to do is to monitor and measure things and think about what they're doing. And within Scops, what we're really trying to say to people is, look, we want you to think harder about why you're using wormers and when you're using them. We don't want to stop you using them, but we want to make sure that when you do, you use the right product for the right reason, and therefore you also get the best result as well. So all of this is part of a process which requires more thought and fits well with the planning concept. And then to build on to top of that, the other principles, some of them are very simple. For example, when you do use a wormer, make sure you use the correct dose rate, that your gun is actually working properly, because it's important that when you do that, you get the maximum efficacy from each drench that you give. Other ones would be to make sure that you're not importing disease and resistance onto the farm, so to follow a tight quarantine routine, and there are specific treatments that we recommend that farmers give at that stage with any sheep that are coming onto the farm. Then we would be looking at things such as choosing the right wormer at the right time, so trying to avoid maybe using a combination of fluke and worm when actually it's the fluke you're after. Then use a flukicide, but don't use a combination. And then you're looking at things like using fecal egg counts and being able to monitor something which tells you when you need to treat, rather than just guessing or doing it on a routine 3 to 4 weekly rotation. So those are the sorts of things that we're really trying to get farmers to think about, and to do that they have to think forward and plan forward.
Jim took on some new ground a couple of years ago, and during our health plan mentioned that the lambs were not doing, were very, very loose, and he was losing a rather large amount of lambs due to high worm burdens.
And it's just, at the time we wondered, had we done right by taking it on? You know, we were just worming. It's terrible.
I suggested that we use Cydectin LA as the hoovering effect from that. By giving the Cydectin LA to the mothers, would hoover the pastures for the lambs.
Cydectin contains a medicine called Cydectin, and it is slowly released from the tissues of the animal into the bloodstream over a long period of time, which gives it a long persistent action. And it's for that reason that it's very capable of reducing the number of worm eggs that the ewe puts out onto the pasture. So it keeps the pasture very clean for the lambs, and as a consequence the lambs pick up less worms and tend to thrive a lot better.
We wanted to see, basically if it worked. So, we split the farm in half. Half of the ewes we treated, half of the ewes we didn't. As they came out of the lambing shed, we treated them, and when they returned here, that's how we did it.
And what happened?
We did egg counts every 4 to 5 weeks, and the results were frightening, really.
Every 4 weeks we gathered the ewes from the treated and the untreated into separate pens and took fecal egg counts from the lambs.
Well, the ewe around about lambing time has a relaxation in her immunity against worms. That starts from about 2 weeks before lambing until about 6 weeks after lambing. And because we're using a long-acting product, we can keep the level of worm eggs put out by the ewe for this very prolonged period of time, and thereby keep the pasture a lot cleaner from stomach worm eggs.
The lambs from the treated group were basically coming back with less than 50 eggs per gram to a maximum of around about 50 eggs per gram. The untreated groups to start off with were less than 50, which was understandable as they weren't grazing. Then 4 weeks later, at 8 weeks, we retested them and they had gone up to 1,850 eggs per gram. They were then treated with an ivermectin drench and then retested again 4 weeks later, and they were on around about 700 eggs per gram. Basically, when you get your fecal egg counts back, you do get a list of worms in there. With the count of 700, the majority of those were tapeworm. So then we changed our program from ivermectins over to levamisole with the praziquantel component to basically take out all the tapeworm and worm for the stomach worms.
We visited independent sheep expert Leslie Stubbings to get her view on Jim's worming strategy.
Well, I think this is a really good example of how farmers can start along the road of the principles. I mean, clearly they've taken a step backwards and stood back and looked at the situation and said, well, we need to think about this. And there are some very clear positive messages coming out from that because, yes, they've used fecal egg counts and we've got results for that. They've looked at it and they've drenched lambs on the basis of fecal egg counts. But they've also started to think much further beyond that in terms of, well, what product should we use? When should we be using it? And as opposed to what people have consistently been doing for the last 10 or 15 years is buying a job lot of wormer at the beginning of the season. Oh, well, we'll rotate the type of wormer, but that's it. We're using that wormer for the whole season. They're now adopting the principle which says, well, actually, we need different wormers for different things. And if we're going to do this properly and get the best out of them, we need to be fitting that in with our monitoring and changing wormer appropriately. And it's just really nice to see that they're working with their supplier who's clearly giving them advice on the basis of their results. Well, this is the best product for now and this is the best product for later.
It cut down my workload for having to treat the lambs. The ewes sheared a lot easier than the flock that weren't treated, and also they're in fantastic condition even now, still going to the tops. I'm hoping it will raise my lambing percentage.